an immigration lawyer can change somebody's life to a greater degree than nearly any profession.
Hello, everybody. I hope you're having a great day as you enter this episode of the Ramos Law Difference Makers podcast. It's my pleasure as your host, Dr. Jim Hoven, to meet with cool people doing things, changing people's lives, and literally making a difference every day. And today, I have one of those guests. Today, my guest is someone who makes a difference in the lives of people wanting to come to this country or who are in this country needing help to stay in the country. His work is critical, his story impressive, and today we're going to find out all about it. My guest today, Mr. Ian Rochstein, and he is from Immigrating to America and the law office of Ian Rochstein. Ian, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
It's great to have you, and I have been looking forward to this moment for a long time, and you and I have never met each other before the show here, but I have had experience in talking with some immigration attorneys along the way because we had talked to some immigration attorneys that wanted to work with us, and so I needed to learn more about it and this kind of thing, and you know, who we could send business to and how it would work and all that. So I've learned just enough to know, like, holy moly, what a field it is. So first of all, tell us a little bit about you and what you do as an immigration attorney.
Sure. My name's Ian Rochstein. I grew up in New York. I went to law school at Boston University School of Law, and I've been in Colorado since 2015. I opened my own practice in 2021, but I've been an immigration attorney pretty much since graduating law school.
I noticed that when I was looking through your bio and some of the stuff you've done, you were really into protecting this part of people's rights. Even in school, I noticed that you did things that would fall under an immigration or public services type of duty or category. How did you get into that? Was it something you were influenced on prior to law school, or where did that come from?
I've always had an interest in international topics. In college, I majored in both international relations and Spanish. Always been interested in maps and different cultures and meeting people from all over the world. And then in my final year of law school, I saw a presentation by an immigration attorney who was describing all the different types of clients that an immigration attorney can have. And it can range from scientists and artists at an elite level from any country around the world to people who are declaring asylum and are fleeing a really horrible situation in their home country, to people who are getting married to the love of their life and don't realize that these days, that's a process that involves a lot of paperwork, and it could be several years until that person is actually able to live here in the United States with a green card. So it offers a opportunity to interact with a very wide variety of people from all different cultures all around the world. And it's very rewarding when you're able to help them achieve what may be a lifelong dream for them of being able to get legal status to live and work here in the United States.
That is such a great, noble thing that you're doing. If we were around the clock prior to law school, what was the turning point in your young life that made you decide that law school was the path to choose as opposed to anything else that you might have been looking at?
That's a good question. Although I don't have any attorneys in my family, I did grow up around a bunch of them. And something all the attorneys who I interacted with told me to take a year or two off in between undergrad and law school in order to make sure that it's the right field for you. So I worked in a couple of law offices in between graduating law school and graduating undergrad and going to law school. I also had an internship with a judge in Long Island, New York, and got to see all different areas of the legal field from different perspectives and decided it was the right move for me.
Nice. That is so good. When you did you do a lot of traveling? You said that you mixed with a lot of folks that were from different cultures and you love to study maps. Was part of your process going to go see different lands and different nations and you fell in love with cultures, or how did that work out?
That could be part of it. In undergrad, I studied abroad in Madrid, Spain. So got some experience there. Always did enjoy traveling with my family growing up, whether it was more local trips within driving distance, and then later on did more trips on an airplane. So yeah, being growing up in an area where I had a diverse group of friends, and just growing up going to their houses and seeing the different ways that people live and their different backgrounds was just always really interesting to me.
Super cool. And when you graduated and you started serving immigration patients, did you understand how broad the category was? Because you just mentioned a few things, and I want to dig into those so that people understand, if you're watching or listening, this is a really important area of the law for so many citizens. Did you understand even how wide it was when you first started?
No, I didn't. I'll say we call them clients, not patients.
Oh,
typically.
sorry. That's my doctor side.
Yeah, exactly.
That's my doctor side. Sorry about that. Thank you. Yes, our clients.
And it is a very wide field. I think there are some immigration attorneys out there who attempt to take whatever different type of case is possible. But like I was saying before, there's a very wide variety of practice. There is, in court practice, the immigration courts are actually not part of the larger judicial system. They're part of the executive branch rather than the judicial branch of the government. So there's different rules, different procedures, and different standards of evidence, and it's a totally different experience. Then a lot of my cases are based on family-based applications. So in that case, if the person is here, oftentimes we'll have the interview at the USCIS office, which is in Centennial. If they are abroad, well, they have to have their interview at the U.S. Embassy in the country where they live. And there's a whole complicated system to get that all set up and able to move forward with it. And then, like I was saying, there's asylum and refugees. There's a whole category of immigration applications that are based on people being victims of a crime or of domestic violence. And there are some attorneys who specialize purely in that, and their practice is focused on just helping those people be able to get their legal status. And then there's employment-based visas, so that can be everyone from like I was saying, people at the top of their field in the arts or science or business, or it could be landscapers or the people who work at the ski resort, and everybody in between. But there are very strict rules, very strict procedures. Just a small error on the hundreds of pages of paperwork can make a huge difference in the application. And right now, the processing times are so long with just about every aspect of immigration that one little mistake or change in procedure can cause months or years of delay because there's such a long delay at every step of the process.
That seems so typical, so unfortunate, but it seems so typical, right, with how this stuff seems to be going, especially since COVID. I don't know that helped what you're trying to get. I know it hasn't helped what we've been trying to do, even though now we're in a whole different phase than we were in 2020. It just seems like not everything's caught up yet.
Yeah, with COVID, on what they call the consular processing side, which is the people who are outside the United States, many of the embassies and consulates around the world were shut down for a full year.
Wow.
Or sometimes longer. But meanwhile, people weren't stopping the applications for benefits, so the line grew and grew and grew. The most active consulate in the system is Ciudad Juarez, where Mexican immigrants, for the most part, process through. I haven't seen the latest statistics, but my guess would be there are at least 200,000 people currently just waiting for their interview for a green card at Ciudad Juarez through a family member.
200,000?
Yes. So those are people who have completed all of their process, all of the paperwork, and they're up to the last step, which is interview with the consular officer, which typically can just be 10 or 15 minutes. They're basically just checking through their documents, and that can be, it's hard to give people estimates of time for how long any of this takes, but in a lot of cases, that's going to be 2 years waiting for that interview, when you've had everything completed. And a lot of these are people who are, separated from their family members for many, many years for whatever reason or another. They're doing it, trying to do it the quote unquote right way. And that's just where the system is at. And some countries, it's a totally different story. If you're processing through Western Europe, it's going to be a lot faster. If you're trying to process through a country that has way more demand than we have the capacity to serve in that country, then you're looking at very long waits. And then for people who are here, you talked about the COVID delays. The most interesting delay I heard was that there was for many, many months or possibly years when COVID happened, USCIS put thousands and thousands of files into a cave system that is in, I believe, Missouri or Kansas. I think it's somewhere in the Kansas City area, where allegedly, it's safe from Armageddon should that so happen, but that's where their safe and secure system is, and cases just languished. They just kind of sat there for long, long periods of time in a literal cave where there was issues of getting the employees of the agency for COVID restriction reasons. There's a lot of details. You could see this reported in major mainstream outlets. But that just gives you an idea. And as an immigration attorney, we are kind of the interface in between the government and the people applying for benefits. And a large portion of my job is just first setting expectations of this is probably going to take longer than we want it to. Say that from the beginning, and giving people my best guess, which is sometimes based on published information from the government. Sometimes it's just based on my recent cases and my best guess of how long a case is going to take. And then every step along the way, telling them, no, we're on track still. It's just that the processing times have gone up even longer since we applied, is a frequent thing I unfortunately have to tell many clients.
That sounds like it'd be very frustrating, both from your side and from their side.
For sure.
What about the person that is in the U.S. and that is not here legally, and they're trying to go through your service to get that status done, and they've done everything they can do, and now they're in this waiting period? Are they safe? Is their ability to stay here safe if they've done all they can do and now it's on the admin side? Or can they say, hey, you don't have it done, you got to go?
That is a question that has a lot of if-thens that I would have to attach to it. The first thing I will break down, and I'll first add that many attorneys who practice any other field besides immigration law often don't know even the very basics about immigration law. I didn't myself before I got deeply involved with it. So that's something I'll just have as a preface. So when it comes to people who are undocumented here in the country, there's two main categories. One is people who just came across the border, no documents, and then there's people who entered with a visa and overstayed that visa.
Like a work visa or something?
A work visa, a tourist visa, different kinds of visas that exist. And for people who are undocumented, there aren't that many options for them to get a green card here. In Spanish, they say arreglar los papeles, fix my papers. And for most people, the way to do it is going to be marrying a U.S. citizen. Just having a child here is not sufficient for many people in order to get a green card. For some it is. Just having a parent, another family member, it's not enough. So on the side of people who entered undocumented totally and are now married to a U.S. citizen, as an example, that's a three-step process. We have to file a petition for them, then we have to file a waiver for them, what's called a perdón in Spanish, and then we have to get them that interview in Ciudad Juarez. With the total processing, that could be a 5-year process right now.
Wow.
From starting to them having a green card in their hand. with a particular delay in that second step, the waiver. There's actually a group of immigration attorneys who are suing the U.S. government because their current published processing times are around 36 months for that waiver. And that's one of the 3 steps in that process. And to answer your question, no, they do not have any work permit that they can apply for while the application is pending. They can't apply for a travel permit because if they were to leave the U.S. for any reason while this whole process is going on, it could completely cancel it. And so they just have to stick it out and live undocumented. Many of these people, they're all married to U.S. citizens or green card holders. Most of them have families. There is no support for them in that stage, and it's only getting more and more difficult. For people who overstayed their visa, their process is a little bit easier. If there are no other complicating factors, they can just file what's called one-step adjustment of status through a U.S. citizen spouse, and they can get a work permit while they're waiting for that to get approved, as well as a travel permit so they can visit their home country while they're waiting for the application to get approved. And they don't have to go to their home country for their interview. It all happens here. Like I said, USCIS Centennial is where that interview would take place. However, it's still, for example, I'm waiting on a work permit for a green card application I filed 10 months ago for somebody in that position. So the system has so many delays within it that sometimes people have their full interview and be able to get a green card before they even get that work permit or travel permit, which is meant to hold them over while they are waiting for the green card.
Man, so many steps, so many pieces going on. What about the folks that are wanting to come over as an athlete to train for an extended period of time or to do business? I know that's a whole different deal than like, I got to get out of here to go to the United States. I just can't tolerate this anymore. I got to find a way, versus these folks that are like, yeah, I want to be here for a while and maybe stay here and maybe not. I'm sure the process has some similarities, but is there differences and nuances as well?
Yes, for sure. That involves the consular processing system oftentimes, because they would be having their interview at the consulate or embassy in their home country. And usually the wait times are significantly shorter for those categories. The government just prioritizes those categories more. There's less demand, and they're able to process those applications quicker. There are different categories for athletes. For example, there's temporary athlete visas. It's a P1 visa, also used for example, touring musicians and performers. And then there's other athletes who can more quickly jump to establishing their permanent residence here in the U.S. Like, for example, if you're an NBA player, you can apply for a extraordinary ability visa, and then that can get you on the path to a green card faster.
An extraordinary ability visa.
Yes.
See, we all have an extraordinary ability in something.
Well, they have.
It'd be nice if they considered that.
They have very specific standards of evidence that they're looking for. When they say that, they mean you have had articles written about you in publications, that you've gotten awards, that you've served on the jury for awards panels. There's, I believe, 8 or 10 different categories of evidence that they accept as evidence of your extraordinary ability. And it really means at an international level that's been recognized, and you can prove it with documentation.
Wow. And then what about those people that are exiling? They feel in danger. I was watching, I don't know if you ever watch much Netflix, but there was a show on there about the guy who was the head doper of all of the Russian Olympic Committee. And
Icarus.
Icarus, such a great show.
Great movie.
And he talks about the connection to the leadership over there and all these things that would happen. And if you'll remember from seeing it, he was in danger. And he's like, he's telling the guy who made the film, I got to get out of here. And he left and had to leave his family behind. That process, do they have to get over here to declare that? Like, they have to get off of their home soil to declare that? And then what's that process like?
Yeah, so there's refugees and there's asylum. Refugees are people who are in another country who are basically signing up to get here for humanitarian reasons. They usually have to be at a UN-sponsored refugee camp to get online, basically, for a visa. Then there's people declaring asylum. People declare asylum upon arriving in the U.S., or the rule is you're technically supposed to do it within a year of arriving in the U.S. I don't know how he did it in that case. I don't remember the details of the immigration process. If he got a visa and came here and then declared asylum. There are some people who are from countries all around the world who will fly to Mexico and then go to the border and say, I want to declare asylum. If you look at my social media, my Instagram, my TikTok, or Facebook, you'll see I recently posted a video from a Cuban refugee who was just able to get his green card this week. And he flew from Cuba to Panama and then made his way through all of Central America and up to the U.S. And this was during the pandemic, and Trump had introduced some extra rules related to when people could enter. He waited at the U.S.-Mexico border for around 2.5 years, scraping by, waiting for his turn to be able to enter the U.S. Then he was able to enter the U.S. Now, as a Cuban, he has special rights that no other country in the world has. There's a law called the Cuban Adjustment Act that basically says you step foot on American territory and you're paroled in, that you can file immediately for a green card. Doesn't matter. You don't need a family member. You don't need the normal connections that somebody else would need here. But that's just an example of somebody. So yeah, asylum is for people who enter the U.S. or are attempting to enter the U.S., and then refugees are people from outside.
Okay. And so if we now have the different administrations, you had mentioned the Trump administration having more rules, with the change in thought processes of parties or leaders or that kind of stuff, has it made, now that we're in the Biden administration, has it made the process of immigration, from your perspective, easier or harder? And has it changed I imagine if it's easier, you have more people trying to get in, as opposed to if it's harder, or maybe everyone just wants to get in anyway?
I wish I could say there was a bigger difference between the administrations. However, it's not as big as we were hoping to. It seems to be a rhetorical difference more than anything else. Just as an example, to me, the most disappointing aspect of the administration's immigration policy is currently I'm trying to help several families from Afghanistan. These are people who helped the American effort during the war there, and then after the Taliban took over in August 2021, and the U.S. forces fully withdrew, the U.S. announced a humanitarian program to help some of those people come over quicker. From what I can tell, that has been, I could confidently say it's mostly talk and very little action. I filed applications for an Afghan family using the rules that were released right as soon as the Taliban took over, and I'm sure you saw the scenes at the Kabul airport, et cetera, and we all know how vicious the Taliban are to people who aided the American war efforts there. It's been a total zero. I just recently read an article that's 90% of these applications are getting denied. Why? It's hard to give a good reason. I just received a letter from USCIS after those applications have been pending for a year and a half, pretty much, and they're asking for all these documentation that's basically saying, why did you choose to use this program that we announced right after the country fell? Why didn't you go to a refugee camp? Why didn't you...
So put a program in place and then ask them why they
humanitarian parole program in place with the idea, as they're announcing it, okay, this is a way that people can get their travel documents here and then have the option of declaring asylum. If you help the U.S. in Afghanistan and now the Taliban government, the ruling government in power, is actively persecuting you because of that, well, in theory, with asylum law, that's exactly what asylum law is built for. And yet, it seems like whether it's because of logistical issues or ideological issues or security issues, I'm not really sure, but huge portion of these applications that were submitted, I was just reading the New York Times, they're just being straight up denied. And these are people with sponsors in America who are submitting their tax returns to say, hey, I earn enough money to sponsor these people, so they're not going to have to go on benefits. They can live with me. In this case, it's an American citizen sponsoring his brother and his brother's family. His brother was an Afghan police officer, actively prosecuted the Taliban. And I even submitted photos. The Taliban came to their home and beat up the wife. The wife has a bruised face. I submit photos of her bruised face. The family fled Afghanistan. They're scraping by in Pakistan. Because we no longer have an embassy in Afghanistan, Islamabad, Pakistan is where we're in theory handling these cases. They're just either overwhelmed by applications or there's just been some kind of, I don't have a good explanation for why, but it's really, I think shameful is the word that I would use to describe it.
And they're not sending you information as to anything going on. You just get crickets.
Exactly. So I filed it right after the Taliban, and I've got a few that are variations on this fact pattern. Filed the application right when Taliban took over. We're here a year and a half later is the first time they get in contact with us about the application, and they're requesting a whole bunch of documents that are going to be impossible for this family to get because the request is acting as if there's a functional government that these people can just request additional documents from. We've got the evidence that these people worked for the United Nations, worked for American contractors. It's all been submitted. And still, here we are. And, they're scraping by in a very precarious situation in Afghanistan. I've got another case where it's a single woman who's on her own in Afghanistan, waiting for her spousal visa to come in. Her husband is a legal permanent resident of the United States. And also the government wants to see for Afghan people that they are in Pakistan before moving forward with anything with their case. Both of these cases, I immediately alerted the government. And here we are a long while later, zero progress pretty much. It's heartbreaking. And I would call it a betrayal by the government. And, like I said, I thought it was going to be a lot better, and that's just an example of one of the cases where it's not.
And is there any chance for you as their attorney to speak to someone, or is it all just a paper trail?
We've contacted the senator's office. Senator Bennett has community liaisons who they do their best to try and help people, but USCIS or the State Department, who's in control of issuing the visas, like I said, whether it's because of limited capacity or whatever other excuse, they are not acting expeditiously in the least.
That is a shame, and I don't know, you would know far better than me what the answer to that is. It just seems
resources.
Like you say, okay.
People and funds to actually process applications. But even that doesn't answer the question, because like I said, I read a news article recently I don't remember the exact number, but the vast majority of these applications for this program that they announced right after the Taliban took over, they are denying them. Yeah,
and trying to move them into the refugee system as opposed to the, hey, come here because you helped us system.
Right.
Man, to change topics to what is maybe an easier way to go, do immigration attorneys work with, let's say I wanted to have two citizenships. I want to be dual citizenship, and I wanted to have one in Canada or Mexico or, Honduras, I don't know. Is that something that an immigration attorney handles on American side, or would you need some sort of processor from the country you were hoping to get your dual citizenship in?
So are you talking about somebody who starts out as an American citizen?
Yeah.
No, I would not help somebody get the citizenship from another country.
Okay. So would you have to use then an attorney from that country
That would be my
to go
suggestion.
that direction?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I know that a lot of people now, especially depending on your political beliefs, are saying, man, I need to look at, based on taxes or politics or whatever, I need to try to have dual citizenship so that I have flexibility in case I want to move somewhere. And so I'd never thought about it till this conversation, if that was an immigration attorney, a U.S. immigration attorney job to help you get that, or if that would be someone else's.
No, it'd be somebody in that country. Immigration attorneys, you only have to be licensed in one state, and you can practice in all states because it's only federal law that you're dealing with. And then, of course, we have clients who are all over the world who are trying to come here. But like you were saying, U.S. immigration law is complicated enough with enough twists and turns. We are not qualified to learn the other 200 countries' own immigration laws.
That makes sense. Do you have a favorite part that you specialize in your practice? We talked about all these different types or divisions of immigration. Where do you just really find your passions?
I like doing marriage-based cases, and I like doing U.S. citizenship applications. I find those are rewarding. You get to work with both parties in a marriage-based case, which can be either a fiancé visa or for a couple who are already married. And I find those to be very rewarding. Most of my cases are for people who are already here, and you really get to transform a family's life when one of the parents can go from undocumented to, hey, I can finally relax and live and work here permanently and have the rights of somebody who lives here legally.
That's so cool. And do you find yourself doing much with the keeping people here on the defense side? And I know that kind of goes into two branches, right? One is through the paperwork side and one is on the court side. Yeah. Does that fall under what you're talking about in your passions, or is that a little bit of a separate deal?
So on my end, I will do court hearings when they do have that relief of the option to apply for a green card through the normal processes. Now, there are other people who usually it is after they are arrested that the government starts deportation proceedings against them, and then there is a specific set of procedures that will apply. For example, there's a procedure called cancellation of removal, where it's basically fighting your case in immigration court, and you have to show how your U.S. citizen and lawful permanent resident family will suffer if you were to be deported. You have to show that you were here for 10 years in most cases, and then it's like mounting a defense in a courtroom. If it's a full process like that, I generally don't take those cases, and I will refer those out to a different attorney.
I see. And have you found that there are countries that, I'm sure the answer to this is yes, but are there countries that are far more resistant to allow their people to try to immigrate here than others, where some are like again, Canadians probably like, yeah, we're basically cousins anyway, no big deal, compared to some other country where they're like, we hate those guys. We're not going to let anybody go there uncontested.
I mean, there are authoritarian countries around the world. North Korea comes to mind, Cuba, where they don't allow their citizens to travel freely. On the U.S. side, that's not as much of an issue that we consider as the local conditions on the ground in that sense. How it's more likely to come out is we won't have an embassy in that country.
Oh.
So obvious examples, North Korea, Iran, Cuba, we do not currently have a functional embassy there. I have a few cases for Venezuelans. We do not currently have a embassy operating in Caracas, so those people have to go to Bogota, Colombia, for their interviews. So that's how I see the consequences of that shake out, is usually if it's a country like that, well, we might not have presence on the ground, and they might have to travel to the country where we have an embassy that handles those matters.
Do we have any kind of special relations with, now you talked about if someone's come from Europe, there's a lot of people that, they're cool in Europe. They want to come here to visit. And so I imagine the demand is a lot less to necessarily immigrate. But are there countries that we're more favorable to or less? And this may sound almost like exclusivity. I don't know. And it's not necessarily intended to be that way, unless that's the reality of it.
It is.
It is.
So for on a base level, for family-based applications, there are 4 countries that get highlighted and separated out. There's Mexico, China, India, Philippines, and then there's the rest of the world. So those 4 countries have caps on each one of them, and then the rest of the world has its own cap. So let's say you are a U.S. citizen and you have family in Mexico. If you want to file for your brother who's in Mexico, you will be waiting more than 20 years for that petition to become current. They are currently processing cases that were submitted around the year 2000 for Mexico, in the categories of brothers and sisters, in the categories of U.S. citizens applying for their adult children, or green card holders applying for their adult children, literally 20 plus years. Mexico, China, India, they have big backlogs in different categories. And then there's, like I said, the rest of the world category, which is all the others. And in the category of brother or sister, I believe they are processing cases, I want to say 2007. No, 2000. It could be around 10 years. I don't want to say exactly. There's something called the Visa Bulletin you can check if anybody wants to check. And you can see how they separate out those 4 countries from the rest of the world.
And is that because just the number of people that want to come in from those countries
that they're like, we had to put a cap?
We had to put a cap because otherwise it would be too crazy?
That was the logic of the people who made the law.
Okay. What does it translate, or is there any political, like, the U.S. says we don't really like how they do business with us, so we're going to put a cap on it?
I've never seen that for an explicitly political reason. I believe the reason, as stated, is that these are the top sources of immigrants, and it's in the name of diversity that they submit it. So if you're or that they set those different caps. So, somebody from India is going to be subject to a way longer cap, and India especially has it in employment-based categories because, as you've probably heard, so many tech workers come here. And, but if you're just from right across the border, and let's say Bangladesh, you're not subject to that cap at all, and your process might be entirely different.
Wow. Yeah, because I could see, as you listed the countries, I could see Mexico being so close, a lot of people would come over. China and India, huge populations. So they're just by pure numbers like, man, we really got to watch this, or, they'll take over all of the available process, won't be able to divide it out.
That's the idea.
It's interesting.
I think that was the idea. Yes. But I've never seen it for like, this country, went against American policy and therefore a cap is applied. I'm not going to say that's never happened, but I've never seen that happen.
Yeah. During times when the U.S. has been at war with a country, direct at war, so in case with Afghanistan or whatever, does that change immigration policy for that country in that case when we are directly in conflict with them?
As far as just directly affecting the immigration law, not that I know of, but as far as affecting logistics, definitely. If a war starts, all of a sudden, all these people are a lot more interested in leaving their country. The case that I've been dealing with more lately is in the Tigray region of Ethiopia. It's not in American news, but there's been a horrible civil war there over the past few years. And there are many Ethiopians and Somalis in Colorado. Aurora has a lot, and all around the state. And so there's been a big wave of them trying to apply for their family members to be able to get out of there. And then what happens is the embassy gets overwhelmed with applicants, and then the waiting times just get longer and longer.
Wow. What is the thing that you get most as your cup fills up from doing what you do? You had talked earlier about watching these families, especially with a married couple, kind of completing that and knowing that they're going to be changing the life for generations beyond them. Is that really the what the juice is for you in this, or is there something else alongside that?
I would say it is a thought I have had that kind of sounds a little bit like an exaggeration, but I think it also has an element of truth, is that besides a surgeon who is literally saving somebody's life in that moment, an immigration lawyer can change somebody's life to a greater degree than nearly any profession, just in the moment. So there is a great deal of satisfaction on that side. And it can be anything from somebody who's just achieving their dream of getting a visa to have their dream job here in the U.S. to their life has been saved in a sense because they don't have to go back to the country where their life is in danger.
Yes. And when you're talking about those kind of people, if someone whose life would be in danger in some way if they went back, is there ways, and this kind of ties back to an earlier question, that if again, there's a backlog of stuff that you have as their attorney to protect them, that if someone comes knocking on their door, like, hey, it's time for you to go, and because we're like, well, wait, I filled out everything, I'm just waiting.
Yeah.
Do you have good standing where you can help change their life that day by them not having to now go through that process?
Not exactly. For people who have pending immigration applications of various kinds, if they're undocumented and, like you're saying, the ICE is the agency who would come knocking on their door, this is a difference that we've seen between administrations, where in the current administration, if the person does have a pending application, whether it's through a family member, asylum, something else, the immigration judge is more likely to say, okay, we can pause that person's case, wait for them to go through the process, and then close it totally. Whereas in the Trump years, and these were because of direct decisions that are made by the attorney general at the time. You know, Jeff Sessions, Trump's first AG, was very famously anti-immigrant. So immediately after he was elected, all these decisions came on down that have a direct effect on the immigration court judges and how they have to interpret the law. That said, for example, one that paused my case or affected a lot of my cases was if somebody was undocumented, got married to a U.S. citizen, they previously said, doesn't matter, we're still going to move forward with deporting them, even if they do have that path to a green card. After Biden was elected, laws like that were, they're not even laws, they're decisions. So the precedent was overturned in some of the cases that were really hurting people.
Wow. Do you ever work with local businesses or other, who are the affiliates that an immigration attorney like yourself would have in providing resources to folks that are coming into the country? Is that something that immigration attorneys do, to say, hey, listen, you're going to need this, and we're going to try to connect you as you fulfill the process of becoming a U.S. citizen?
I'm not sure what you mean.
So, for example, if someone if they came here and they didn't have family, they just found themselves here, they crossed the border, and they come to see you and they say, man, Ian, I need some help in getting established here. And you say, okay, well, we're going to have all the paperwork. In the meantime, here's an organization that will help you find a place to live. Here's an organization that can help you find a job. I mean, is that part of what you guys do?
I have volunteered with and associated with a number of different nonprofit organizations that help immigrants in the Denver area. A few of note I will mention. There's one called Remain, which is actually north of the city, close to here. I want to say in Westminster, RMIAN. They help lots of detained immigrants. There's also Lutheran Family Services in the city of Denver that helps lots of refugees and does have a program where they help people settle into life a little bit. Those are just two examples of organizations I've worked with. As far as I can kind of give people guidance on that, like how to integrate into the community, it sounds like you're saying.
Yeah.
So for people, I mean, the most common advice I give people is, first of all, if you don't have an immigration status, Colorado now has a driver's license you can get. It's called a SB 251 driver's license. That even somebody who's totally undocumented, if you can show that you reside in Colorado, you can apply through the DMV for that. Also, a big issue for people is they don't have a social security number. So I'll frequently tell people, oh, well, you can apply for what's called an ITIN number from the IRS. It's a tax identification number. And even if you're undocumented, you're still not legally working, but you do have a number that you can be doing taxes under, register your business under. So that's the two most common pieces of advice I give to people to address their concerns when it comes to living here in the U.S. But the situation you gave where somebody just shows up, unfortunately, the system we have is they have to have a path for me to be able to help them at all.
I see.
It's a family member. If they are undocumented, it's most likely going to be a family member, and it's most likely going to be a spouse. The paths are a lot narrower through other family members. And even people who are totally law-abiding, we sometimes find if they're, undocumented, that they still are not able to apply for various complicated reasons. So, yeah, that's it.
Okay. Well, speaking of advice, this is a question that I ask all of my guests, and this has been a fascinating conversation. For those of you watching or listening, I hope that you'll appreciate the process. Number one, I hope you appreciate where we live. I mean, this has got to make you feel as a citizen so blessed, even with all the craziness at any given time in a society, including this time. So many people want to come here. Definitely. And that says something. And I think
Yes.
that warms my heart. And so with you, the question I ask everybody is, if you have learned one piece of advice or have been given that piece of advice that has helped you in what you do, both inside the four walls of your job and outside in your world, what would that be, and would you share it with us?
As a solo practitioner, I think something that keeps me able to be effective is creating systems. So that's been something that's been really important to my practice and the way that I interact with clients, keep all of, like I said, the many pages of applications and supporting evidence organized. Due dates are very important. And I've had some great mentors that I've watched how they run their own practices and taken a little bit from each of them and added some of my own secret sauce too. And that has helped me a lot when it comes to running my business. So I'm trying to think of an actual quote or something. I'm not sure I'm going to come up with something right now.
No,
like
listen, being organized and having a systems-based process for all parts of your life, I think is wisdom that is made of gold. That's
Yes.
incredible.
And I've seen the offices where they don't take that seriously and vowed to not be like that.
Yeah, you don't want to live in that chaos.
Yeah, so many times people come to me, and the reason they're coming, they've already started their case, but the reason they're coming to me is that their previous attorney is not responsive to them, doesn't keep up with them on case updates. And they say, what's going on? And sometimes I've found literally they've lost years of time when they could have otherwise had a green card and been supporting their family, but their attorney just didn't follow up with them, or something got lost in the mix in the communication. And so that's a worst case scenario to me that I really work hard to avoid.
Oh, thank God for you and the work that you do, Ian. This has been, again, for those watching and listening, this has been really eye-opening. Number one, we appreciate where we live.
We've barely scraped the
surface. Yeah, and we've barely scraped the surface. And I think besides appreciation, it comes down to there are so many options, but yet they're not so easy to take care of. And so to know what a complicated process this is, if someone has seen this or has gone through this, they can relate to what you're going through. So if this means something, if anyone's watching this or listening and knows someone going through the process, I would highly recommend that they share this episode with them so that they can at least know, even if they already have a different attorney, they can know to ask different questions or go down different roads or ask their responsiveness time. But for those people who want to learn more about either becoming an attorney, learning about immigration, or even reaching you for help, how would they best go about doing that?
You can just call my office, 720-574-9459. You can find me on Instagram and TikTok under Colorado Immigration Law. And then on Facebook, it's Immigrating to America, LLC. I try to post educational and entertaining clips there addressing issues that I get asked and that I see would be most useful for people seeking immigration advice.
I love it. Well, Ian, thank you for the time, man. I wish you continued success. You definitely have a friend here in Ramos Law, and I look forward to working with you and continuing to develop this relationship.
Thank you so much. This was fun.
Now, if you enjoyed this episode, please, again, remember to share it. If there's a special guest that you would like to see or something that you would like us to talk about, if someone you know who's making a difference, please reach out to me. You can email me, jim@ramoslaw.com, and we will get guests on board that meet what you're looking for. So until next time, remember, you can go out there and make a difference.